Welcome to another episode of Behind the Veil, where we delve into realms of high strangeness and exploring phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. I'm your host, Mike Hughes.
And I'm your co-host, Christian Julian.
Today, we are thrilled to have renowned author and UFO researcher Ryan Wood joining us. With a deep passion for unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos, Ryan has delved into the realm of global UFO crash retrievals like few others have. His groundbreaking work, MAJIC Eyes Only, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology, serves as an authoritative chronicle, meticulously documenting over 100 compelling cases spanning from the late 1800s to modern times. Drawing from a wealth of evidence, including official documents, eyewitness accounts, and even physical evidence, Ryan masterfully navigates through these intriguing incidents, offering readers an in-depth journey into the hidden history of UFO government cover-ups. Join us as we embark on a deep dive discussion exploring the fascinating world of UFO crash retrievals as we go behind the veil with Ryan Wood. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mike and Christian. I look forward to sharing what I can share about crash retrievals and the enigma that is ufology.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And before we get into that, I have to ask every guest. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the current situation that we're all seeing. I mean, how this UFO phenomena is unfolding daily. I mean, how have you been perceiving this? And did you ever think in history that we would ever be in a point in time where we would be seeing what's happening today?
Well, no, actually. I wrote the first edition of MAJIC Eyes Only in 2005 and led 7 UFO crash retrieval conferences from 2003 to 2009, when everybody thought we were the freaks talking about crash retrievals. And then Grush comes along and confirms it all. And people say, wow. Now it's even my kids say, oh, okay, Dad is not hallucinating again. It's real.
Yeah, you're like, surprise, it's real.
Yeah. So I'm delighted that the mainstream media is finally taking it in a much more serious way.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, like you said, you've done the conferences on crash retrievals, and with that, obviously your main focus has been crash retrievals throughout your work. I want to dive into, why did you particularly dive into crash retrieval? I mean, there's so many different directions you could go with the UFO topic regarding the phenomena, but what made crash retrievals a main focal point of your research and interest?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. It was really at the Crash Retrieval conference that one of the patrons there said, aren't you going to be done in a few conferences and don't have enough? And so I decided to write the book on crash retrievals, and discovered that at the time there were 74, but now there's 104 that are documented in the book. So I focused on that because I personally was fascinated with crashes. It was hardware. It was about proof and nuts and bolts. And there's so many different ways, as you mentioned, Mike, to go in ufology. You can go after abductions and lights in the sky and video analysis and witness testimony. And there's so many. But for me, it was all about hardware and government documents. And so that's what motivated me. And that's where I decided to specialize, because that's really what I specialize in, is just those two things.
Yeah. And then go ahead, Christian.
I was just going to add, like, when you get a lead on something, how do you kind of pinpoint, like, okay, I'm going to put my time and effort into this rather than like another case?
Well, it's a good question. The answer is I haven't been doing much investigation since the Cape Girardeau case myself that happened in the late 2000s. At least my investigation goes. But the thing to remember about MAJIC Eyes is that I really synthesized and brought together the primary researchers in many other disciplines. Like, I'm not the primary investigator for Roswell, Stan Friedman or Kevin Randall or others have done, or lots of research, or Kecksburg at Stan Gordon. And so there's many other people that have done great research, and I try to just pull together and synthesize their research into a chronological synthesis of the cases, and rank them and rate them.
Okay. How do you like rank them or rate them?
Well, that's a great question, Christian. So the focus is really on where did it come from, the provenance of the case. Are there any documents around what's supporting it? What's the quality of the witnesses? How many witnesses do you have? Are there any what I call zingers or weird anomalies that are like impossible to fake, or they're just obscure facts that turn out to be true. So there's a complicated metric and different weighting factors that are in the book that describe how each case is rated. But it's a needle. It's basically a 5-point needle from low, medium, medium, high, and high. And I don't try to overthink it, but it's just a basic way of saying, most cases are like under investigated, and they sort of have a neutral needle because people haven't put in the work to move the needle either down or up. So that's how you rate it.
Gotcha.
You're in your book, you really go back pretty far. I mean, you go back to the late 1800s. I wanted to see if you could actually maybe talk about some of the earlier, because I've never even heard of any of the crash retrievals in the 1800s. I mean, what are some of the most earliest crashes and crash retrievals, for that fact, that you go into in your book?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. So the book starts off in 3000 BC with the CIA's undue interest in Mount Ararat. But that's really not a crash retrieval. It's just sort of a fascinating event. And then the first one is 1897, Aurora, Texas, where Jim Mars is the primary investigator. And he wrote the foreword to the book, the original book, as well as this one. And he's an expert in this particular case. And he was a Dallas News reporter. He wrote the book Crossfire about the JFK assassination. He was a great guy. He's deceased, but he was a great guy to spend time with, between smoking cigars and drinking whiskey in the heat of Laughlin, Nevada, that I so vividly remember. That was fun. But the story of the crash there is that there was some radiation that was picked up. There was a small headstone for the alien body in the cemetery. There's a official Texas state marker there in Aurora, Texas. The body was removed or clandestinely removed and can't be found anymore. And so he was the primary guy, and that's the story. And it's actually a little different than most crash retrievals, which are, it crashes, there's bodies, there's witnesses, the military takes it away, and you're left with not much.
Right. And actually, I do know that case. I didn't realize that it went that far back. But yeah, that's an intriguing case, because there is, like, apparently there are headstones, I do believe, but I think they dug it up, or somebody. I remember seeing something about that where they like dug it up, or I think, is it on like private property or something like that? I can't remember. It was very interesting story, though.
I think it's in a cemetery, but it may be a private cemetery.
Yeah.
And in the book, it's a whole chapter about that is written. The other cases that are all pre-Roswell, the 1941 Cape Girardeau case, the Battle of LA case in 42. Those are some of the big ones that are that have some good, that I've had personal involvement with in the police crash investigations and the Cape Girardeau case. So,
when you say personal involvement, I mean, what do you mean by that?
Oh, where I was the primary investigator.
Oh, he was
So
there.
yeah. So this gets to Christian's comment about, well, what excited you lately? Well, this was the one that I did myself,
That's awesome.
and then turned it over to Paul Blake Smith, who wrote the book Missouri 41, and did further research. But people often ask, well, how do you investigate a UFO crash? And in this particular case, we had the testimony of Charlotte Mann, who is the granddaughter of Reverend Huffman. And Reverend Huffman was called by the police department out to this field where there was 3 dead alien cloned bodies, and he provided blessings to them. And then the military showed up, carted it all away. And what you have to do then is you got the videotape testimony of Charlotte Mann and the deathbed confession of Flo Huffman. And you look at fire station logs. I went through that and found out, when specifically the fire department was out there, and then looked at historical aerial photography to try to find out precisely where it crashed. That's one of the key things is, in any crash, precisely when and precisely where are the most difficult parts to figure out. And if you can get those down, you can make a lot of progress.
Yeah, you just mentioned like the military's involvement in this, and I know in the Eyes Only book there's like a special forces or like special
Retrieval group.
Yeah, they're a guideline essentially that they follow. Can you go into that a little bit and kind of how you came across that? And
You talking about the Majestic Documents, or?
Yeah, I think he's talking about the Special Operations Manual.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's the operation manual.
Yeah. So this is a little preamble before I talk about that, is that the Majestic Documents comprise some 3,500 pages that have leaked from 1984 up until like 2000 from 7 different sources. And some are very easy to authenticate, and some are more challenging. And the Special Operations Manual, because it's typeset, and it was mailed as a undeveloped Tri-X film to Don Berliner, who was an Aviation Week and space reporter in Washington, D.C. He had just come back from the Oshkosh fly-in show in La Crosse, Wisconsin. If you've ever been to that, it's quite the thing for experimental hobbyist aircraft people. And the film was mailed from La Crosse, Wisconsin, and the Quillen Pharmacy. And Don developed these negatives, and my father, Dr. Bob Wood, retyped them and created a replica of them. And we started to analyze the details. I mean, what you have is 8 by 10 glossy pictures where the gentleman, opened the page and held out his hand and took a photograph, and then flipped to the next page and took a photograph. I mean, the registration's pretty good, but it's not perfect. But you see the fingers in there. You could probably get some.
It's like he was having to do it very quickly.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, like he was just snapping as it go. Did anybody ever find out who that was that was taking those photos?
No. The actual purloiner or leaker has never been identified.
Well, good for him. Thank God, right?
I'm sure he's probably deceased by now. But
I would imagine.
The thing that I did was on the inside page of the book was a stamp that says Unit KB88, Building 21, Kirkland Air Force Base. So I went to Kirkland Air Force Base, talked to the facilities manager, and sure enough, there is a Building 21 in 1954, and it was a cinder block building. You got a picture of it. And then also on the next page, there's what's called the change control page. So this is where the officers remove page 12 has been replaced. I mean, because the manual starts in April of 54, but the last entry in the manual is like 57, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
It's multi-year manual.
yeah, multi-year manual, and you don't want to keep a lot of these manuals around, but you and so the change control, it says the initials of the officers, JRT and EWL are the two initials of the two officers. So I went to the Albuquerque phone book and found for 1954. Sure enough,
Oh, wow.
there's two military officers. They happen to both live on Perimeter Road inside. So I did the sort of FBI thing. Well, where did they really come from? Who is this? And so that was very reassuring that the provenance is rock solid.
Yeah.
And then you go into the content. They have a description of alien type 1 and alien type 2.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, it's really mind-blowing. I mean, because by the way, you can see all these documents on your website, majesticdocuments.com. If people want to check it out, I highly advise that you do, because as you were talking about, the details that they have in there is pretty mind-boggling, and it's so like nonchalant the way it's described too. It's just like very matter of fact, like we have this. But sorry, I just wanted to let people know that they can find these documents at majesticdocuments.com. But as you were saying, you could talk, if you don't mind sharing some of the details about the descriptions of beings and some of the other things that you could find in those documents.
Yeah, I mean, it's a how-to manual. They sort of start off with, well, this is why we're doing this, and this is the purpose of the manual. It's really recovery and disposable. So there's a page about where to ship the parts. For example, intact power plants go to Area 51 S4, or if you have clothing or foodstuffs or supplies, it was kind of a weird language. It's supposed to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base's Blue Lab. And there's discussions of well, what do you tell the public? How do you cover it up? What deception do you use?
What do you say to the media?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you tell them it's a fire, it's a down satellite. Tell them it's a meteor. Balloon, right?
Yeah. the balloon thing seems to work pretty well these days. Still using it, matter of fact. We just shot out a balloon in Alaska.
Yeah, it's interesting how they would split up all the material. It's not, they wouldn't all just keep it at one area, or
maybe it's going off to specialized departments. Some people you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, maybe.
Right.
One thing I wanted to bring up is I shared the majesticdocuments.com on our social page, and I guess there was a military guy who went and checked out the documents, and he brought up something interesting. He told me that that these documents didn't come across as any type of military style manual. Have you compared these documents, being that it's in a manual type format? Have you seen any comparisons between a typical military style document of that time period and compare it to the MJ12 documents? Is there any comparison, or are they a little different in comparison?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. And the answer is, I found an Army field manual in the Stanford Government Library with the same War Department seal in 1954, 55, and the same typeset anomalies. So there's it's printed on a hot lead printing press, and the Z's get used very seldom. They often get a little debris underneath them, so that they're raised slightly off the line, the leading. So there's that. The other thing is that we took the manual to Robert McCarter, who is a government printing expert. He wrote the government printing style manual, which is a big, thick book on how to print government documents.
Yeah,
And
that sounds about right.
It's amazing. You talk to him. We went to his house. He had just retired, I think. My father and I went to his house. We're on a card table there, and he had his loop out and everything. And we showed him this document, and his first reaction was, well, I would think it would be a fake because of the title, between, extraterrestrial technology, recovery and disposal. But then he started flipping through the manual and he said, oh my goodness, the gazes are raised. And,
Wow.
And his opinion was, absolutely, this is printed on a hot lead printing press. And furthermore, I think it was probably done by the CIA group, down on 10th Street or something. And so his response to the indenting, the paragraph styling, the leading, the hyphenation that went on, he ticked off like 10 or 15 rules that you have to follow to make it a printed manual.
That's interesting.
They're all right.
Yeah.
And then my father did more research on the etymology. That's sort of the word use.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the word screwdriver is 2 words in the manual, where it's 1 word today, because of the advent of the cocktail, and there's other examples of that subtlety in the document.
Now, like, have you come across like which groups were specifically handling these? Was it different departments and different branches, or was it like, mainly Army, Navy, Air Force, or
And then to tag onto that, this is global crash retrieval. So how do you orchestrate that and still, how do you have crashes in other countries and yet everybody's playing ball on the same team, so to speak?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I have the complete answer, but
dang it,
I'll give you one answer, and that answer is moon dust.
Well, okay.
It's a Project Moondust. So Project Moondust was a responsibility to pick up Soviet space junk, but things that fall out of the sky that are on radar, and they would run all over South America. They would run all over the world, picking it up. And in some cases, they picked up crash debris, most likely, and sent it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or to Area 51. But, I'd say 80% of their recoveries are probably credible space junk, but the other parts were ET. So, I wonder about that mechanism of, well, how do you get people to cooperate
and know where it's going to land? And
well, you don't know where it's going to land.
Yeah.
You're tracking on radar. It's like, we have the best military in the world. I think that the general attitude is, we're not going to tell the Peruvian government. We are just going to go.
Yeah, that seems to be the case in Varginha, Brazil.
Right.
It kind of seems that way. It looks like they. That to me is one of the most, I think, most credible, at least from recent times, that went down, just because there was so many people that seen it. Not only that, but they saw the beings that were there as well, and you have so many eyewitnesses, from civilian to military. But again, you have allegedly, the U.S. shows up in C-130s, other craft, and next thing you know, they're hauling the ship away. It's
Right.
just, that's what boggles my mind about this whole incident, is that, one, it is, like you said, a global crash retrieval program. I just find it interesting that people have been able to keep the lid on it, yet these are happening all over the planet, and it seems that the U.S. has been orchestrating this ever since.
Yeah. I'm also reminded of the Cajon, Mexico case, where they had a crash, and The military showed up and I think
Yeah.
killed a bunch of soldiers or just took it all
Yeah.
from them.
Yeah. They straight up just took it.
Just took it. The other thing that I think could very easily happen is, it crashes in, an African country, and they've got it surrounded, and the military's got it, and they just, send a telegram to the State Department saying, hey, we got some crash hardware, some pictures and video. Please wire me $1 billion, and I will give it to you.
Yeah.
And they would do it.
Yeah.
It's just that's a very reasonable. They don't have the PhDs to analyze it. Do you think they could get any technological advantage by having alien bodies or crash parts? Who are the best scientists in the world to recover this and look at it? I want to try to circle back to one of Christian's questions about various organizations.
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about different militaries that might be involved. The Majestic Documents tend to point to the interplanetary unit and phenomenon unit, and that's a part of Assistant Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Technical and Scientific Branch. So it's Air Force. So I would say it seems like all the branches wanted pieces of this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in 42, we had stuff going to the ocean, and the Navy got it. So the Navy has parts. And then in the Army, it went into the San Bernardino Mountains, and the Army got parts. And then the Air Force got parts in Roswell. So everybody had their own little. And then the day after Roswell, Colonel Corso was Army, right? So he was focused on that. So I think everybody got their pieces of it and tried to make hay, and eventually I think somebody put their foot down and cleaned up the fiefdoms and said, you guys all need to work together, and there'll be one centralized location. That seems like logical management to me.
Yeah, I'm about to say it makes total sense to do that.
And I think one of the new revelations that was broke, I forget what organization broke it. I think it was the Debrief or one of these organizations, but it was the CIA Office of Global Access apparently has been the one running the global crash retrieval programs. That just recently came out not too long ago.
That was Grush testimony, or
I'm not even sure if it was Grush on that one. I forgot who actually broke that story, but there were several different journalists that teamed up that were working on that story, and they never denied the program actually exists. I mean, they didn't admit to the fact that they're actually retrieving extraterrestrial spacecraft, but according to that story, they were in possession with over 9 craft, and that was again the Office of Global Access, which is run by the CIA.
Right.
So that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, who's in charge today? The CIA.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And, I mean, maybe the NSA and the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office,
some 3-letter agency, or a bunch of them.
Maybe helping along the way, but it's funny. I'll tell you a story that my dad related to me about the CIA. I mean, he was was rocket scientist and radar, and he used to go to the CIA every once in a while to talk to people about radar cross sections of nuclear reentry warheads from the Russians and things like that. And he had a few friends, but he called up one friend and wanted to go out and talk about UFOs. And basically his contact said, Bob, I can't talk to you about that anymore. I just can't do it.
Wow.
And the implication was he knew an awful lot about it, and he can't divulge classified information to a military contractor. So that's just one example. And there, even in some of the documents, there's I mean, one of the Hill encoder, who was the first director of the CIA, I think it's a CIA document, and there's clearly linkages to the CIA.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got their hands in a little bit of everything, it seems like.
Yeah.
Do you think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do you think that the retrieval process is, is it more they're trying to cover this up, or you think it's more of like we want to get a hold of this technology so we can try to like back engineer it?
Oh yeah, it's a little bit of both, but it's all about the technology. And we need the power plants, the weapons. I mean, one of the things that caught my eye was, in the Special Operations Manual, there's a section, I think, let me find it here. Yeah, here it is. Basically propulsion units, fuel, etc. It's supposed to go to Area 51S4. Fragments composed of elements of materials recognized and known or current science and technology, aluminum, magnesium, plastic, go to Area 51S4. Non-living, non-human organisms in apparent good and reasonable health. There you go.
Wow. Yeah.
Good and reasonable health. Send it to OPNAC, BBS01. Never figured out what OPNAC stands for. BBS01, I think, is Bronk's biological section, or Dietlif Bronk, who's one of the guys that did the analysis of the alien. But, OPNAC is, some operational command thing, but, to have a specific, real, verifiable definition of that would be really good. And then, the last one, any device or portion of a device thought to be offensive or defensive weaponry. So they wouldn't have put it in there if they hadn't found something that would have been weapons.
Yeah. And so much has the capability of being, weaponry, especially with energy. And I know that you have a little bit of role on energy. I think you're working on some type of device that hopefully you guys will be able to get out to the world sometime. I heard about. But speaking of that, if there was technology that they potentially could recover from some of these craft, that could be technology regarding energy capabilities, do you think that would ever see the light of day, just due to the fact, I mean, we're going down conspiracy lane here with this, but there is so much wealth tied to fossil fuels, that industry. There are entire countries and armies that are completely funded off of fossil fuels. I mean, you look at places like Saudi Arabia, even Russia. I mean, that's what funds their entire war operation, keeps the country going. I think they have a GDP of like what Canada has, but without fossil fuels and natural gas to sell, they wouldn't really have an existence for the most part. Do you think that any of these technologies that could be, free energy devices, pulling something out of the vacuum, something that would be completely life-changing here on this planet, do you think that those type of technologies would ever see the light of day, or would they keep them under wraps for as long as they could? Because there is so much money tied up into stock markets. I mean, that would change the world dramatically. There would be major plus and minuses off of that. For that type of technology moving into reality. And when you look at it, I mean, our energy devices have not changed much in the past 100 years. I mean, we're still running, some places are still running off of coal, for God's sakes. To me, I find that very odd. But again, do you think that these technologies, if they were able to take them out of crash UFOs, do you think they would ever see the light of day?
No. But let me expand on that thought. And in the AI ufologist, there's discussions about, well, how do you disclose to the world what sort of technologies you want to offer up.
Yeah.
And the energy devices is certainly one thing, as well as gravity control, but those are probably the most disruptive things. I mean, you alluded to my my day job as the CEO of Electric Fusion Systems,
Yeah.
Where we're working on small scale roller bag sized direct to electricity fusion. That's the super low cost, 10 to 100 times cheaper. So, and be highly disruptive, as you say. But the pathway for our insights is historical research into anomalous inventions and normal science, rather than leaked antineutronic power plants or something like that from crashed hardware. I suspect that the crashed hardware energy systems may be too complicated or not adaptable enough. But maybe they solve that problem.
Yeah.
I think it's certainly they know how to do gravity control. But the big, unfairness is that they've denied humanity, the 3 or 4 billion people that are still at the poverty line without food, water, shelter, etc., any chance to be uplifted into normal life. And
that's bad.
Energy changes everything. I mean, it can. You can transform entire nations with that.
Yeah, I mean, that is their great crime against all of humanity. And it's their hubris. The thought that they can have, 1,000 cloistered scientists that are really smart working underground for a decade or two could match the global effort of science and engineers of millions or hundreds of millions of professionals is just it's just silly.
Yeah. What crashes really stuck out to you the most? Again, I mentioned Virginia, Brazil. I mean, obviously everybody thinks of Roswell, which is obviously a classic and very well documented. But what crashes really strike you the most as you've been diving into this throughout all these years?
I mean, the classic ones are Roswell and Kecksburg and Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, and Braxton County, West Virginia, and Virginia because it's new. And even the fine work of George Knapp in the 2008 sort of Laughlin, crash recovery. It's not clear whether or not it's an ET craft or one of our advanced developments that had mission failure, as Grush so eloquently presented when his testimony.
Did you, when you were watching Grush's testimony, did he catch you off guard with the Italian crash? I think 1933, because that was, to me, I don't think that was on anybody's radar that I'm aware of. I've never heard of anybody go, "Oh yeah, I knew about that." Did that catch you off guard? Were you aware of any rumors about that particular crash in Italy?
Well, in my first book, I didn't have it in there in 2005, but I actually went to Italy and was interviewed back then. And I think I met one or two of the lead investigators, and they gave me some documents because I think they have some documents about that. I sort of went into my stack of crashes and then added it. So I didn't think much of it, but it was in the file. And it was a good reminder that I'm surprised that Grush didn't, go back to the 1897, because we have a government document that said, yeah, let's start back at the beginning in 1897. His testimony was neat in that he clearly stated, yeah, I can name names, cooperative and uncooperative, names of corporations. And I'll give it to you in a skiff, in a top secret briefing that's need to know. And he certainly, as a whistleblower, briefed the inspector general on it. And so from my perspective, there's 50 more people that now know a lot more about crash retrievals. They still may not have been cleared to understand the program at all, but the more people are exposed to the truth.
Yeah. How important do you think the conversations surrounding crash retrievals are? I mean, we can look at bright things in the sky all day long, and that doesn't prove much of anything. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to be the hardware, the physical stuff you can put your hands on. And apparently there's pieces of crash material that's spread out. I think Gary Nolan, some of the to the stars guys have some different pieces of this material. But how important do you think that the topic and discussion surrounding crash retrievals are going to be to the disclosure movement? I mean, it's kind of the that's where the hardware is at, and that's the physical stuff you can put your hands on.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be important. But so will the abduction phenomenon and some of the other. It's sort of a cross section, but lots of people will resonate with hardware. And Linda Moulton Howe's arts parts, which I've held in my hands and seen the layers of bismuth and magnesium. I had her come and give a talk at the UFO Crash Retrieval Conference. I don't know, maybe it was the 2005 or 6 conference. Some of those old conference proceedings are all on Amazon that you can find and read the descriptions. And then Lear, John Lear had parts, and Antonio Huneeus, I believe, had some. And there's several people that have. There's some more from Roswell. Ramy Baca had alleged parts, but he's been more discredited, and it seems to be just more aluminum and magnesium. The most credible one that I can think of is this layered bismuth magnesium every 15 angstroms. And you start to look at the dielectric properties of these things and how electromagnetic radiation interacts with these different layers. And you can start to believe that, oh yeah, there's something unusual about this configuration, but you can't make it very well, although maybe you could sputter layers of bismuth and magnesium and alternating layers. I mean, if you got money to go do real science, you can probably get further along. But yeah, I believe that hardware is going to be a key role in the disclosure discussion when and if it gets closer to that point.
Have you had anyone come to you, maybe like personally or during these conventions, that has been a part of these retrieval groups? Maybe you weren't able to record them, or they just in passing were like, "Hey, like I've been involved in this," and you couldn't prove it at the time. But have you had any situations like that happen to you?
Because I haven't really heard of anybody really. Coming across going, yeah, it would be nice to hear from somebody who goes, "Yeah, I'm a part of a crash retrieval group." I haven't really heard of anybody really coming out like that.
Well, first I'm going to answer Christian's question. The answer is no, and God damn it, why not? I mean,
they're like, stay away from that guy.
Yeah, it's like it just hasn't happened, and it's kind of surprising. But I think of the guy Clifford Stone, who was part of the crash retrieval program. Or allegedly, I mean, he's deceased now.
Interesting character.
Yeah, exactly. If you've ever been to his, I vividly remember going to his house in Roswell, and the smoke-filled place, the clutter, the dishevelment. It was it was, and his dog. It was unusual.
The damn dog.
I can almost smell it now.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
That's such a bummer. I just, that is amazing that it's like they're able to handpick these guys that they know are never going to rat, or they're just eliminating these guys when the job's done. It's kind of like, but then again, you have people's family members missing. It just seems odd.
Well, I think that in the past they were probably more brutal. Today they're more strategic. Okay, so you want to join MJ-12 effort? Okay, so why don't you graduate from the Air Force Academy or similar? You serve 5 or 10 years doing something useful in space or what have you.
Yeah.
You have the psychological profile that they've already screened to know that you will, in fact, shoot anybody, if ordered to.
Sure.
That you are willing to sign up to live underground for 5 years, probably. And and by the way, at the end of the time, you're willing to sign the piece of paper that says you're going to have your brain erased.
Wow.
So
and so that's what I'm thinking is the deal. And maybe your brain isn't totally erased, but your memories are gone, or
that would be.
I would imagine the caliber of people that they probably have, because it's a limited amount of people, I would imagine, that are on these teams. But I would imagine that they would find people that they know that they could trust, diehard, black ops type people who are, who know how to be quiet, who know how to do the job, that aren't going to talk. They're probably very well compensated and rewarded. They're like, you keep your mouth shut, we'll take care of you. You don't say anything.
Yeah, the retrieval teams, I think, are straightforward. I mean, I don't think that's. I mean, you could take any Navy SEAL team and assign them to go pick up a crash event, and they would do it.
100%.
Yeah, and so
allegedly, they say that it's been it's corporate these defense contractors, that they have their own teams. That way it's not foilable and all these other things. That way they're able to keep that secret. It's kind of like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. As long as it's in a corporation that's kind of heading this off, they have their own protections of their own secrecy on that. So I mean, obviously there's got to be some kind of military interaction combined with it, but it seems like some of these groups are being headed off by
like the Marine that was with Grush, his testimony about running into these, like, what he would consider these, like, black op guys, and that really kind of blew my mind, especially hearing that they were able to manipulate that vehicle the way they were, and the potential that there was, like, human trafficking going on with that.
I don't know. I don't think he was technically with Grush. He was are you familiar with the guy he's talking about, Ryan?
Not really, but
somebody,
I get the idea.
It's somebody that Greer brought out, and he
Greer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was Greer. Greer brought it out, and he allegedly talked to Congress. That's never been completely verified by somebody from Congress saying, yeah, we spoke to him about that. But according to him, they came across, and it wasn't a crash retrieval team. It was just, they were using reversed engineered technology, and they were doing what he claims was human smuggling. It really goes down the rabbit hole with it. But I mean, again, he allegedly talked to Congress about it, and I don't know where that could go from there. But it was definitely interesting. It makes for a good campfire story.
Yeah.
You have a book, AI Ufologist. How do you think artificial intelligence may help us in the future answer this UAP dilemma, and how can that the AI technology, how do you think that's going to be helping people in the future to solve this UFO dilemma?
Well, that's a great question, and the way I wrote the AI Ufologist a couple months ago was I was doing for work. I was taking a lot of fusion scientific papers and quantum physics papers and turning it into software engine that we used with ChatGPT to mine that for insights. And I decided, well, why don't I just take a bunch of UFO books and use the same methodology, and then start asking it questions. And so that's what I did. And the first question is, well, it's the classic, well, why are they here? What's the agenda? And then I asked the next question. And the first question, the agenda, I was pleasantly surprised at how sophisticated and complete the answer was. And then the next question was the same way. And then I kept asking it tougher and harder questions about transparency and disclosure and the purpose of MJ12 and why did they abduct humans and what are the messages from crop circles technologically, or I just went down this my own mental rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And 16 hours later, I was done with the book. I mean, it was like I was possessed.
Wow.
Because the answers were, and I would say a third of it or half of it was like fresh in my mind. I mean, you can remember so much, but you can't remember it all, and you can't put it together as cleanly as it turns out in this book. So that was what excited me about doing it, and it's really almost a blueprint of how you could do disclosure, or how to have regular briefings and tell people why there's secrecy and explain a little bit more about a certain technology and how it's benefited humanity, maybe, although that's a double-edged sword, because somebody's going to be pissed that Lockheed got the IP or the sauce and their competitors didn't. So that was my process, but it's very, it will help, I believe. I'll do it again probably another year after I get more good questions, and the corpus of knowledge improves and expands. And I think it's really maybe a tool about educating people about, well, why are they here? What are they doing? And then educating governments about, well, this is how you could handle this. And it's sort of I just was trying to help.
Yeah.
But,
I've been reading. Oh, go ahead, Christian. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting how some people are very pro AI and very, anti-AI. And I kind of don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I'm not like scared of it or anything. Like some people freak out like the idea of it, but I think it has potential to be good and bad. And I think it's definitely an interesting way to like write a book and kind of like go down that rabbit hole, like you said, especially like if you were looking at it and, a lot of it was correct or, made sense.
Yeah, it did. I did some editing, but, at times it's, I was on George Norrie and he asked the question, for GPT, for my tool, is there a God? And it gave an answer and talked about, religions and scientific protocols and so forth. But at the end of it, you get sort of context.
Yeah.
But nobody says, "Oh yeah, there is a God."
Yeah.
And you feel empty a little bit that there's not a crisp, clean, definitive answer.
Yeah.
And so that, but no, more to your question, Christian. I think, as you say, it's a double-edged sword. It's going to be good and bad. I think that for the most part, it can be very helpful. I just, I'm a knowledge worker all the time. I used to go to Google and type things in and try to get answers, but now I go to ChatGPT and ask it complicated questions, like the last question in the book. This is kind of long, but what are the 5 main forces that are interconnected, driving global challenges? How are government debt and money and economic forces affecting this? How is the political and social polarization of the left and right mindset and actions influencing our future?
Good one.
Compare and contrast global geopolitical attitudes, policies, priorities in countries, especially between U.S. and China. And when it comes to our planet's future evolution, all in the context of the alien presence. And so then it proceeds to spit out 4 or 5 pages, which you sort of go, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested to see what the answers were to some of those questions.
Yeah. I think it's going to answer things that we've been completely incapable of answering, for sure. I think it's, I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see some dramatic things come out in the future. Because obviously this is just in its infancy, but man, I think there's so many different questions, whether it could be for medical, health, a lot of challenging things that we've never been able to overcome that AI can help us with. And granted, I mean, it could also go off the reservation, and next thing you know, we're living in the movie Terminator. But I think it's going to unfold the way it's going to unfold. I do have to ask though, and this is the big question, and people are probably going, why haven't you asked this question yet? And this has been brought up before. What if alien beings are so advanced where they can traverse time and space to come here, and you know where I'm going with this, to come here to Earth, why crash? And that is such a, I think anybody who's ever spent more than 30 seconds thinking about UFO crashes and retrievals, you have to wonder, how is it that they're crashing here?
Yeah, well, you're echoing the exact question that the congressman from Missouri asked, at the UAP hearing. So, and right in front of the book, I start off with that question because it's so important. I mean, so the answer is multifaceted. I mean, they could crash because we shoot them down.
Yeah, I believe that's happened. Matter of fact, well, they allegedly just shot one down. Well, not just shot one down, but the Alaska, there's apparently some revelations coming out on that Biden ordered the shoot down, and that was, I think Ross Coulthart was talking about that today, actually, or in his last podcast, that there was a retrieval, and it was a cylindrical silver object that they shot down, and it was not a balloon. But anyways, continue, sir.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the proximity fuses, an anti-aircraft fire of the 1942, era. There's the radars, which can interfere with some navigation. That in the early crashes, I think they seem to have wired in the details of radar now.
Wasn't that allegedly connected to the Roswell crash, is what they said?
Yeah,
it was the radars that took that down.
Yeah, the radars that took, or the lightning storms that happened in New Mexico. People forget that a good negative lightning bolt. Yeah, there's positive and negative lightning bolts. Are 10x bigger than, and that's could be serious. Then there's the whole notion of these are disposable biological drones that are traveling across the galaxy on one-way trips. And so what? They crash. Or there's the objects of, let's seed this kindergarten planet with technology. There's no way they can make the craft fly, but at least they'll try to educate themselves and learn more about math and science and physics and biology. Yeah. And so there's a good list of reasons why they can, or they could decide that, well, in the case of Tunguska, I had a remote viewer targeting that particular event, and it was a biological craft hybrid biological mechanical, and it self-destructed and blew itself up. It's like, okay, we have a policy in our organization for planet XYZ that when we get there or finish our mission, we just self-destruct.
Yeah, because not all these craft are what you would call crashed or damaged. I mean, even according to Grush, some of these craft are in perfect working order. Whether or not we know how to operate them, it's a different story. But so that begs the question: whenever we're finding craft that are in perfect shape that seem to be operable, that makes you wonder, what was that? Did they just park it and left it, and then something happened and they never just made it back to the craft? I mean, you could go so many different directions with that, but not all of these craft are damaged.
Yeah, that's true, and you wonder why they did that. But it sure seems that I think there's a couple of cases where they had some intuitive, quasi palm reader, psychic type people try to go in and put their hands on the this was in Corso's book, I think, where they had these controls that were you put your hands on, and they did that, and then freaked out and ran out of the craft or something to that effect. Lots of I don't know. Do they have recovered intact craft? Probably. Have the ETs taught them how to use it? Maybe, but I don't have any evidence.
So,
go ahead, Christian.
So when you say like ETs, like just in your mind personally, like what do you think? Are you thinking like little gray aliens, or you think maybe something more akin to like what we are, just more advanced? Like what do you think?
Well, I think it's a sort of a catch-all phrase for the whole panoply of ET races, from the reptilians to the grays to the little Chinese styles to the tall whites to I can't even think of them all. You need to interview another expert in all of those different
Or revert back to your MJ12 document manual. Talks all about them in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's just two races talked about there, and so the type 1, which is the grays, and type 2 is sort of a slightly taller but Chinese-looking description. So, yeah, there are some other books, and I think they can change shape. They can also, literally go into your mind.
Yeah. I've been reading John Mack's. I'm actually in it right now. His abduction book, and I tell you what, that is such a mind bender of a book. I mean, hearing the conversations that he was having with abductees, their experiences, what they were seeing, the messages that they were getting. I mean, it really, kind of, if you take it for word, I mean, it really paints a very interesting picture of their reasoning and involvement with human beings. And it goes a lot of different directions, but it's quite a book, that's for sure.
Yeah, very scholarly.
Yeah.
I mean, and then there's the work of Jacobs and others around this, abduction or experience or phenomenon. But I think there was another project. They also had John Mack had like 1,000 letters.
Yeah.
That he got that came to him, and I always wondered, well, who has all those letters?
I know, right?
And somebody could read and analyze those and turn it into another book, the Letters Project or something.
Yeah, good idea. Whitley Strieber would be a good guy to ask on that. Matter of fact, we had him on not too long ago, but I think he still continues to get letters, and I think he's still diving through that. It's interesting. You don't really hear much about the abduction phenomenon much these days. Not saying it's not happening, but it's fascinating, and I think we're starting to go into a direction where people in Congress, I think we're going to start hearing more about abductions in the future, where it's going to be a serious conversation, because obviously that's, UFOs have always been taboo, but when you get into the abduction, cattle mutilations, that's even more uncomfortable territory that people really don't want to personally dive into. I'm all about it. I do want to, before we wrap up, I do want to get your opinion And I know this is just speculation, but what do you think that we're actually in a moment of disclosure, or do you think that we have dug ourselves, meaning the government has dug themselves in such a deep, dark hole that do you think that they're playing this proverbial kick the can down the road because it's just so nasty? You can't have disclosure without revealing the sins of our past. Do you think that's something that's kind of holding us back from having an actual real disclosure?
Yes. But let me expand. I mean, many people, and I applaud Steve Bassett and
Yeah.
the other advocates for disclosure and their enthusiasm and hard work around this topic. But I just think at the end of the day, every year they make a list. Here are all the reasons we should disclose. Here are all the reasons we shouldn't disclose. And the reasons they shouldn't disclose is always just a little bit bigger than the ones to disclose, and so they don't.
Yeah.
And particularly this year, because we got an election, and if it's Trump, I doubt that he has. I mean, he lies about everything, and I'm not sure he has the sanity to deal with it. And I'm not sure that Biden has the sanity to deal with it either.
Yeah.
It's almost like I have more confidence that China or Xi might say, okay, guys, we're reclaiming the mantle of global leadership. We have ET technology. We've had it.
Yeah.
But, we're advancing our 2,000-year dominance in the world population or something.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah. I think China actually admitted I don't think they admitted they had a crash retrieval program, but I think they admitted that they had their own ATIP, they had their own UFO research government organization. I can't remember I don't think they actually named what it was, but they did mention it. I think it ended up on one of their digital news outlets in China, and then that was kind of the end of it. They didn't really go deep into it, but obviously everybody has to have some type of program going on in every country. I mean, there's just no way that they're not seeing these things, that they're not detecting these objects in our sky.
Yeah, well, and particularly for crashes, I mean, my book Magic Eyes was biased towards America and English-speaking countries because I couldn't get good data out of China or Russia or Africa.
Sure.
And so there's 104 there. There's another 5 on my desk, and they're probably underreporting by a factor of 2. So maybe there's throughout modern times, maybe 200, 250 crash events. But China's got more geniuses than America. They got a good education system. I mean, they're trying.
Yeah.
Although it's just a matter of time before they could take the mantle and disclose, or America. It's just a question of how it's done and who gets hurt.
Yeah, it's not going to be pretty. There's no easy way to rip that Band-Aid off. I mean, it's going to be ugly one way or another, but it's just got to be done.
Right,
and
exactly.
I just don't. I think that people are just playing kick the can, and they're like, you know what, deal with it after I retire or once I'm dead and gone. I'm cleaning my hands of it. I'm not talking about it until we get this, till I'm out of the picture.
Yeah.
That seems to be the case.
Yeah. Christian, you got anything else for him? I think we're going to get close to wrapping up here.
Yeah, I know you got to go, Ryan. I just wanted to kind of ask, do you have anything you're working on in the future, that we can look forward to that,
Well, I may do a little ditty called UFOs Who Knows?
Oh,
wow.
So, nice reveal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what it is a series of famous people and their quotations about UFOs and a little bio about each one.
That'd be good.
Interesting.
It's military, it's religious, it's celebrity, it's congressmen, it's presidents, it's it's a cross section of society that can bring more people in to the reality, because the man in the street says, I don't care.
Yeah.
But if they see Taylor Swift in here, or a quote, or
Lord.
Beyonce, or
every teen girl in America will be.
If she gets into
Stanley Cups.
if she gets into UFOs like us, boy, we'll have disclosure next week.
Yeah. Well,
I like that. I like that. So
that'll be a good one.
So I don't know when it'll get done. I'm busy. I mean, if electric fusion starts to move forward, I'm gonna, have to jump into that with more effort. But that'll be in the public domain. But I thank you so much, Mike and Christian. That was been wonderful to be here and share what I can to give perspective on the crash retrieval systems.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been an awesome conversation where we've definitely been glad to have you. And if people want to find out more about you and your materials, your books, where should they go?
Well, Amazon has it all, and then the website's majesticdocuments.com or MAJIC, MAJIC, eyesonly.com, or the specialoperationsmanual.com. All those three websites and Amazon should set you up pretty well. And let's see, one other thing. There's another book that maybe a different time. This is out too. The Encyclopedia of Flying Saucers.
Yeah,
cool.
And what's fascinating about this is that it's original paper and ink.
Wow.
And we did forensics on that. And the cover says the highest classification for this document is top secret magic. No foreign dissemination for U.S. eyes only. Exempt from declassification or RADA. Special handling required, not releasable to foreign nationals. And it went into the Air Force in 1960 and came out in 1989.
Wow. Was this the same thing that was like the manual they were teaching their Air Force cadets? Is that has anything to do with, what I'm talking about with that one? There was apparently there was a I don't think it's ever been leaked out. There was I think there was pictures, but apparently I think it was in the 60s, there was allegedly a manual for Air Force personnel where it was basically an encyclopedia of UFOs and beings. So I was wondering if there was any type of connection to that.
Not that I'm aware of, not familiar with that, but
gotcha.
I remember there was a federal fire department manual that went out that had a whole section on how to deal with UFOs and crashed UFOs. And it was pretty benign, but it was clearly
something.
Something. It's going to be weird, but
we're all about the weird. So
we embrace the weird.
Right.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much. You've been a real pleasure to have on. We'll have to have you back on to maybe dive into that book sometime. Keep up the good work, and hopefully maybe you'll be adding a new addition to Crash Retrievals to your book. I know this one, the one that you have now, is like a revised version, correct? Like you've added on to that.
Yeah, it's updated and revised. Some of the crash cases have been updated, as well as we added 30 more UFO crashes to it.
Unbelievable.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe the Alaska one where Ross called talking about. Maybe that'll be a new one for you. We'll see.
Somebody else was saying there's one off Sweden in the water.
I think that's like a private group that's doing. They detected something, I think, with like a submersible, and they've had some. They've detected an anomaly. I was reading up on it about a month ago, and I think they're actually filming a documentary about it. I think that's why it's also been kind of hush-hush, because they're waiting to put this documentary out. So should be interesting. Cool. Well, thank you, Ryan. We really appreciate you. I think that's going to wrap us up for us tonight. So thanks so much, and we'll see you here next time.
All right. Thanks so much.
See you.